Hello and welcome to Module 2, Metasploit Framework and Structure. In this module, we'll take a look at the Metasploit MSF directory. We'll take a look at the actual Metasploit directory itself. This is sometimes referred to as the Metasploit Framework directory. We'll look at generating some documentation based on the information that's there. Obviously, you can go online and read the documentation, but it's often nice to have it locally available to you. And then we'll look at utilizing what's called the Metasploit search command to allow us to find payloads and exploits. Just some extra bits and pieces to help us get familiar with Metasploit. So first off, let's talk about the directories. There are two core Metasploit locations. One is MSF, and it's actually a .msf. It's a hidden file location. And the second one is the Metasploit directory, or often referred to as Metasploit Framework, which exists on the system, depending whether it's Windows or Linux. For the purposes of this module, we'll be using a Linux machine to be able to traverse through the files and the folders. Inside those core directories are subdirectories that will contain the modules, the auxiliaries, and the payloads, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff that's part of the core building blocks of Metasploit. If we look at the .msf4 directory, the hidden one, this contains history, logs, loot, modules, plugins, and ultimately the connection to the database. The history file and the logs, for example, will contain a history of all the things that you've done, as well as any error logs that need to happen and be generated. The loot folder, so let's say you break into a target machine, you implement a keylogger, the keylogger will actually write its values into the loot directory. And the modules and the plugins are the places where you can create your custom methods, functions, whatever you want to call them, in order to be used inside Metasploit. Now, if we go to the Metasploit directory, this is where the core components that make up Metasploit. So we have, for example, modules, plugins, tools, libraries. If we go a little bit deeper into the modules folder, you'll see that it's broken down into exploits, and then exploits is broken into the operating system or the device or the type that the module is connected to. We can also look inside the modules folder and there'll be a payloads directory. Inside there, it's grouped into three areas: singles, stages, and stages. Different varying types of payloads for different types of operating systems or applications. We can also go further into the auxiliary folder, and this is where we can access auxiliary components or services. So for example, we have the scanner folder. Inside the scanner, it will contain SQL scanners, or it will contain ARP scanners. There's lots and lots of different auxiliary components that once we have created a session to a machine, that we can actually run these auxiliary components. Now, if I wanted to navigate to the Metasploit Framework directory, I can actually utilize a cd command, and I can use opt metasploit. Remember, that's the Linux location. And then there's three subdirectories: apps, pro, and msf3. The msf3 is actually a link folder that takes us to another location, which is the one that's listed below for generating documentation, and we'll go through the steps to do this. We can navigate to the Metasploit Framework location. We can ensure that yard is installed. By default, it may not be, so we can do an apt-get space install space yard, and that will install this yard component that's used for generating documentation. We then utilize Python to spin up a HTTP server, and then I should be able to browse to the URL, and we then should see documentation from the Rails files that have been created for Metasploit. If I wanted to browse through the modules, and we'll do this in a moment, I can go into the folder structure and navigate through. I can then also utilize the search command to allow me to search for different types, whether it's an exploit or a payload, by specific platforms, because that list can be quite lengthy. So it means that we're able to restrict or narrow down that list by using the search command. So let's get straight into it. Let's look at the MSF directory. Let's look at the Metasploit directory, and then let's look at using some search commands.